In recent times, they now have to go to the well of Parliament, or the well of another place, as I should say, to actually give an account of what it is that they have submitted. These submissions represent assessments of what would be required to maintain existing services, honor contractual obligations, and to implement various government strategic priorities. Hence the acts. More interestingly, is the concept of the grant. You ask yourself, what is the grant? We will have to accept that along the way, that political judgment, we will hear a lot of talk about fiscal space, we will hear about competing priorities, we will hear about macro fiscal targets, all intervene between what is requested and what is authorized. Sometimes the gap is a modest one. In other situations, the gap by virtue of supplementaries at another time is significant, as we would have heard today. I will not endeavor to address the gap as it exists. It already does. However, what we need to do is to examine what happens when the gap becomes a structural, persistent, and is severe enough to impair the functioning of the institution that is meant to support. So there are several consequences that can exist, which are not necessarily just mere fiscal consequences. There are operational, reputational, and in a lot of ways, the gap produces an issue that is deeply humane. It actually impacts on the individuals who are required to carry out these specific tasks. We will have seen phenomena over the years where, because of fiscal constraints, many institutions, departments, and even ministries are underfunded. And they're not underfunded out of anything malicious, they're just underfunded because we do not have the resources available to effectively, properly fund these institutions. I always say in the private sector, many, many years ago, I would have started as one of the technocrats who would have prepared a budget in a company, and you thought you really did a really, really good job. Then that budget goes upstairs, and then you're so surprised what comes back down, and then you hear, at the end of the day, you hear the number is the number. In the private sector, we have a different view of that number. When we do a budget, the number is the number. If you say, I'm going to make X amount of dollars in revenue, then you better have to deliver on that. If you say that the budget, which is the expenses, are the expenses, you dare not go $1 beyond that. Obviously, when you run a country, which in some regards could be considered a very large company, in some ways, you realize that those things are not necessarily the order of the day, and some flexibility must prevail. But when you look at where we are today, when you look at how the process works at the end of the day, so we're in a situation where the process is that we approve a budget. The process then looks at 12 months later, the process looks back, and then there are adjustments. We've heard other colleagues speak to that. We would have approved for the 25-26 period, $5.1 billion, revised that up to $5.89 billion, which is the gap that was mentioned earlier, of about $710 million. The question for us is, are we surprised? Are we surprised that we've learned of a gap? Right? Of that gap, we would have seen that there are two supplementary resolutions that produce $562 million. And then there was another gap, a remaining gap of about $148 million. that reflects accrual adjustments, depreciation, schedule amortization, and other technical revisions. All of these things we would have seen as they come in. The question for us then is what happens in the various ministries that would have effectively led to that request for those adjustments. An analysis will show that there were 17 ministries in total that would have gained adjustments to the tune of the 562 million, or 93 line items. I'm not going to sit here and try to create the impression that I'm such a brilliant guy, but what I'm very good at is that I'm a student of AI. And I've been doing AI for a number of years, probably before even AI was AI as we understood it to be. That document that we will have seen is 800 plus pages. It took AI 5 minutes and 25 seconds to actually produce a summary of an 810-page document. 5 minutes and 25 seconds. We got to get accustomed to AI, sir. We can't hide and we can't say, you know what, we are scared of AI. We got to embrace AI for what the power of AI can do. It effectively allows me to make better decisions during the course of the day, right? So that's how I identified that there were 93 line items actually impacted by the AI. At the end of the day, sir, there are 5 gaps that defined the story of that 562. There's the BTI that had an approved budget of 43.6 million and rose to 201.2 million, an adjustment on the gap of about 362%. There were other areas within the analysis, Ministry of Agriculture that rose to 107, Transport and Works, Health that actually moved up from 354 to 431.8 million. That occupied about 52% of the gap, sir. When you look at the numbers like that, I remember early in the conversation, one asked the question, what do you get from the increase in the expenditure? There are a number of specific areas. Many of the areas are listed. You know, for the BTI, they had projects like the Enslaved Person Burial Ground, National Botanical Garden, Performance Arts Center, the Geriatric Hospital Work, Sam Lord's Castle Property Adjustment. All of these things were actually would have contributed to that increase. Were they valid? At the end of the day, one can argue that yes, they were all legitimate, valid expenditures that were effectively required. The fundamental structure for us, though, as we move forward, is to understand whether or not these, or whether or not a supplementary as a tool is a viable tool and a tool that will continue to occupy our space as we go forward. I personally don't see any way around it, despite coming from the private sector where there's no such word in the grand scheme of things. There are expenses that are allowed from time to time, or adjustment to expenses that are allowed. But we need to be ineffectively be able to actually move forward. When you look at institutions, and having the Minister of Health in our presence, and I look at the QEH, and I look at the QEH and I analyze the QEH, the question becomes, was the $64 million supplementary a viable number for the QEH? But one will have to go back and look at the QEH in its essence. So if you go back to the earlier years or the prior years, and you look at the QEH and you saw that only $120 million is actually allocated to the QEH at that point in time. So it would have been $120 million, Mr. President, plus whatever the health levy would have generated for the QEH. One just has to then take out the salaries and wages, the personal emoluments from the QEHs, allocated spend, and you would have realized that there was no choice but for the QEH to come back to the table at some point, whether it was Q3 or Q4, for a supplementary. It was absolutely no choice for the QEH to be able to do that. And I think that that's a fundamental issue that we have when we look at the numbers. Every single number that I look at, with regards to the estimates, I always ask myself the question, let me take personal emoluments out of the conversation. And when you take personal emoluments out of the conversation of every single ministry, you get to what I call the ordinary playing field. It becomes exceptionally difficult to run the business. Absolutely difficult to run the business. So we have that phenomenon that goes on and is perpetuated. There's a lot of reasons for that. But that is the order of the play for the playing fields that we actually have. So when they take personal emoluments out of a school, and again, with the help of AI, you can do this analysis really quickly. So you ask AI, get all the schools listed, put a nominal complement of students to those schools, take out all the personal emoluments, and tell me what is the remaining cost per student. And you will see that there are some schools that AI will tell you are no longer viable, because the remaining money per student in that school, AI could not determine at $65 a term could effectively do anything for a student at that particular school. All schools are not equal, sir, as you would know. There are some schools that get a little bit more than other schools, but that's the fundamental issue that we currently have. So we have some structural issues that remain within the conversation. I guess for institutions like the QEH, the problem would be, when will the QEH come back to the table for a supplementary in this financial year? Now, I must also do say, though, that in the analysis, and I would have to compliment the writers of the estimates and the government in this regard, there are some recalibration that has been done within the estimates to allow for some of the institutions to be better. And the QH is one of those institutions that would have had a little bit more, if I could use that term, sir, given to them in the grand scheme of things. That helps to move their bar up. So one can argue that maybe if they do come back to the table, they won't be coming back for anything that maybe in the past that you would have seen in terms of the grand thing. But there were 5 gaps that you can identify that actually would have the 5 fiscal gaps. I am not an accountant. I am an engineer by training. So I guess numbers mean a lot to me at the end of the day. But there are concepts that we would have seen within the concept of the budget and the estimates. And I will say that not all the gaps are the same, but the 5 gaps that basically were identified in principle would have been a deliberate, what we call a deliberate compression. And this is in a situation where known costs is understated to achieve a fiscal target. That is not a deliberate action by anyone. That's a practice. That's a business-related type activity. Then there's structural deficits, where you, in effect, you know that there are some institutions, departments, SOEs, where their permanent costs always exceed their revenue. One only has to look at the Transport Board as an example of that. Their inherent costs always exceed their revenue stream. Then there's things like emergency shocks. So you have these scenarios whereby you have some unforeseen event that requires you to quickly go and get some money and to be able to move on For example, Hurricane Beryl. Hurricane Beryl is recorded in at 17.5 million. And that's a legitimate use of a supplementary. You know, these things happen, they're unforeseen. They happen, you have to do what you need to do. And then there's a lot informal gaps. Informal gaps is where you do not set, we as a small country, we don't set exchange rates. We don't drive costs. And these things actually impact on your numbers. So today, we set a budget, and we say it's going to be $1 million. And then by virtue of informal gaps and things like that, you're starting to realize that the interest rates, the exchange rates, all these numbers move up, and a significant impact on the operations. So I would say if I liken it on to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs obviously will look at all of these overseas missions, and they will put together a budget, and they will say, well, okay, if you're around the US area, you're probably doing a 2-to-1. Lord forbid if you're going to any other part of the world where exchange rates are very, very volatile, how do you actually budget against those? Some people try to normalize it and will give you a number that they would use and say, okay, this is the best guess. But if things go really, really radical, and you've got to finance those overseas missions, then you're paying more. Seldom do you ever pay less in these situations. And then there's the fundamental one of an absolute failure in governance, whereby, and I don't think I need to talk a lot about that one, whereby it just don't work. The governance structure falls apart, and you're left exposed at the end of the day. So the reality for that adjustment or those supplementaries, in my opinion, sir, would have been affected in some way, form, or fashion by all of these specific gaps. The question then becomes, what is the process, and if we can reform the process around supplementaries, because the supplementary, as you know, is an ask to approve an expenditure that has already been committed or has already been spent, and all of these things. So these are things, in my opinion, that as we go forward and we look at reform, and was what I've been mentioned earlier, that we need to look at to be in a position to put mechanisms in place that create more accountability around these activities. So we need to really be in a position, sir, at the end of the day, when we look at estimates, to find ways and means to actually improve the mechanisms around the estimates so that the conversation can be much more palatable, can be much more of an understand, can be much more collaborative. These are all the things that we are effectively being able to ask and to be able to look at. We've got to find ways to structurally normalize some of the activities as we see these activities to happen. So when I look at the estimates, one can say that there were eight of the 17 ministries or so mentioned earlier. One can say that 8 were substantially corrected within the estimates in a way. Health, by virtue of the increase that was given to health, missed housing, education. You can see that there was an attempt there to actually correct some of the anomalies associated with these ministries, to bring those ministries up. So the estimates, in my opinion, demonstrated some corrective action as it relates to those ministries. There were 4 ministries that were partially corrected in a way: the agriculture, Prime Minister's Office, Environment, Legal Affairs. They were all, in some way, one or the another, partially corrected. We had 4 ministries that effectively had one-offs, again, that would have lent itself to a normalization more so than anything else. And then there was one ministry, per se, that one can argue needed a little bit of work to effectively go in and around that, to effectively allow for maybe some better control as it relates to those numbers. That's expenditure, sir. What is very interesting, though, is the issue of revenue. We would have seen that the 25-26 revised revenue was pitched at $3.9 billion. The budgeted revenue for this financial year is just over $5 billion. And then as you go forward, back to the forward-year revenue, the forward-year revenue dips back down into the $3.8 billion revenue. In my opinion, sir, that is speaking to a one-off situation. So we're seeing within that there is an anomaly to be normalized somewhere in the future, where we are having a windfall or so within the exercise. That anomaly, in my opinion, and as I said before, I'm not an accountant, but reading the numbers and looking at close to, is centered in and around the corporation tax, or CIT, as it was said. The question then, it begs the question, how was the estimates would have been put together as it relates to this one-off? It begs the question as to whether or not we're going to take all of the CIT and spend it in one financial year. The estimates would suggest that an effort towards that latter would be the case. But more importantly, sir, is what happens in the 27, 28 go forward. When revenue falls to 3.8 as projected, the compression, I am sure, will return. The compression pressure returns. The gap cycle restarts. And we will be back to, I wouldn't want to use the term the good old days, but we will revert to a scenario whereby we will be looking at the situation as we would have looked at the situation in recent years. So the real question for me, sir, would be in and around whether or not the 26, 27 commitments were sized for 3.8 billion or 5.1 billion. Putting a face to the gap, sir, the gap is just not necessarily a number, because we tend to be always here speaking towards the numbers. A lot of us are somewhat brainiac when it comes to these number games, so we speak a lot about the numbers. But I want to, sir, with your permission, put a bit of a face to the estimates and the reality. So if you take some of the heavy hitters who always take, or who the demands are always highest, and you look at the QEH, I want to ask why I constantly talk about the QEH. But the QEH is just that vehicle within this country that is so large. You know, outside the Ministry of Education, those are the vehicles that really dictate the pace of this country. The QEH, being in health, has even more so than the Ministry of Education, because in my opinion, without health, you're nowhere alone. So whether you are a school child or you are my grandmother, if she was still alive, health is wealth. And obviously, health always takes priorities in conversations. But you're looking at the QEH staff, and you're looking at a historic situation for those folks. And as I said before, if you were to take the wages or salaries out of the QEH, sir, and with the best intentions, what is left at the end of the day, and you ask the staff at the QEH to run the QEH, and this is just the QEH, it has nothing to do with the other health institutions, sir, and you ask the staff to actually effectively run the QEH at a different time and in a different life, and I was associated with the QEH, they would say to me, Mr. Niles, chicken nuggets and bread going upstairs today. And that is a very, very, very telling statement, because the QEH has about what? 500 beds. Sorry? 535 to be exact. 500 beds. It is, you know, in Belgian parlance, we used to talk, when anybody went to the QH, you say, oh, you went to the hotel, right? Because for many people in the country those days, they never went to a hotel, but they go to an institution whereby you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and people coined it the hotel. For whatever reason, they just coined it that. So when you take those salaries and wages, sir, out of the equation, and you ask the QH to run, it doesn't work. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. It just does not work. So that's why I said before, I was very glad to see that there was some effort there to create some stability in and around the QH. You know, 120 million, as per the estimates the last time around, to give you an example of that in the maths, and you look at the health levy, which I would say kicks in around 60 million, not 80 million or any of those sort of numbers, and that is a function of the activity within the country, sir. You're asking that institution to run on basically 185 million. I don't think I've ever seen a QEH's budget that was less than $220 million from the individuals who prepared that budget, and that has nothing to do with capital works. So we have to be realistic in our expectations, in my opinion, but the reality is there. There is a reality for us. A very wise man once said to me, sir, when you go through life, you will live. You will have a live reality, and then there's la la la, right? I think that we are in the live reality, and I would sincerely hope we don't ever get to la la la. You know, that is just the reality for us. So you put a face to those individuals who work there. They're under significant pressure. They do the best that they can with the circumstances that they have. The equipment shortages, their drug shortages, there are a number of things that impact the institution every day. Doctors who have nurses, the entire staff, all day long have to make life or death decisions in an institution like that. So we have to put a face to these numbers, sir. Then there are other folks within the system who, by virtue of the difficulties we have as it relates to paying, the availability of cash to pay, would have had the duty allowances now paid after a hiatus of the numbers being owed. At least they were recognized in Resolution 1. So again, we have, you know, the system was such that we have addressed some of that. Again, that's another phase. All the individuals that I mentioned here turn up for work every single day in this country. The vast majority of people turn up for work. And that's still a plus for us. I know people talk about absenteeism, they talk about sick leave and those kind of things. There are still the minority, sir, in my opinion. The vast majority of people do turn up to work and try their best to do what they need to do every single day. At the end of the day, sir, we all should be in a position where we look for how do we improve the system, the mechanisms, and how do we be able to move things forward. A couple of recommendations that, in my opinion, require no money and may have been alluded to by previous speakers is in reporting. So I would like to say, sir, that we are in a position that we always monitor the gaps, what I call the annual ARCS grant gap, to see how that is performing, how we would want to report on that. We need to cap advances mechanisms by 3% of the approved budget. Again, in the private sector, for most of the medium to large companies, and maybe even some small companies, where technology drives our fate all day long, your budgets are actually put into technology. The technology dictates whether or not you can spend. It keeps track of the approved spending. It gives you updates. And in many, many scenarios, they actually cap a number beyond that budget. In many situations, that number is always less than 5% of the approved budget. When you exceed that number, you cannot spend anything more, and you're running upstairs to somebody trying to ask a question as to, can we spend more? The issue surrounding institutions like the QEH, as we go forward, sir, I am not sure if we can continue to fund the QEH or to monitor the QEH as we currently do. Institutions like that, in my opinion, require multi-year funding agreements. I know it's an SOE, it's a very large SOE by all of our dimensions. Maybe we need to look at multi-year funding agreements between the giver and the taker. What are you going to do on a rolling basis as it relates to these mechanisms? Similarly, we always talk about capital works, sir. And I don't know, maybe with the technology available today, maybe the Chinese can build a hotel in 1 year. But I don't think that anybody in this part of the world can build anything of structure in 1 year, possibly not even 2. Getting up good, you may be looking at 2.5 years or so from ground break to a structure that is functioning. So again, we have to look at multi-year capital appropriations for respective ministries that actually manage or are tasked with managing or invested in major infrastructure. Lastly, in the terms of the recommendations, and this is one that's an ongoing one for us when it comes to certain institutions that actually have a structural deficit, we got to find ourselves in that happy land whereby we resolve these structural deficits. A good example of that is the Transport Board, sir. We've talked about the Transport Board in a lot of different ways over many, many, many years, but yet the Transport Board remains in limbo, so to speak, because it has a structural deficit. It's a reality for us. The bus fare as calculated by cost and revenue does not work. It does not work. I'm not going to put a number out there as to what the bus fare should look like, but there's just a reality for us that when it comes to certain institutions, SOEs, ministries, departments that actually have structural deficits, we need to recognize those to see how effectively we can manage those deficits in a better way. So there are some questions that we can ponder on, sir. We can talk about supplementaries, and we can realize that every government has supplementaries. It's a Westminster system type style activity. The question is whether or not at this current stage of our development, if we will continue with that, and whether or not it is normal practice for us to be able to do those things. We can look at how we would want to solve the gaps or correct those gaps as they appear in the 26-27 estimates document and be able to go forward. As I mentioned before, we are making some progress in those areas, it would appear from the document. We've tried to correct some of the anomalies in there. But as was mentioned before, at the end of the day, cash is king. And when you call on the Treasury, sir, and somebody asks the Treasury, do you have the cash available for me to do X, Y, or Z? And the Treasury says, sir, no, we're paying salaries and wages this week. You know where the apples fall. So again, those are things that we have to look at. The whole issue of the revenue being upsized by the CIT is something that we need to pay close attention to, because if we have treated it as a one-off in the current year and we have scaled our activities towards that, then the question becomes, what will be the residual activities that we have scaled up that will require financing in the 27-28 period when we revert to the normalcy in and around our revenue, sir. Those gaps, as I mentioned before, without any change, those structural gaps will actually return to us. So we can make a choice, sir. We can make a gap choice. We can choose to do things differently, or we can choose to remain the same. But I do take it, sir, that from the estimates and what I've read and seen and analyzed within the estimates, that we have made the choice not to allow things to remain the same. We have made the choice to be effectively to be able to move forward in some way to effectively manage those gaps. And those would be some of the recommendations, sir, that I would make. They don't, in my opinion, they don't require any significant amount of money. But the reality for us is that we do have to do things differently, and we have to be in a scenario or a situation where we actually move these things forward and move these things in a situation that actually makes much more sense to us, sir. There are, permit me, sir, there are a couple of, well, there is an institution really, sir, that I would like to make specific reference to. It's an institution that is dear to me. It's an institution that I would say, if not for that institution, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. Probably a few other people you may know may not be standing in the positions that they currently have. And sir, that is the Barbados Defense Force. And I would like to take this opportunity, sir, if you permit me to thank all the members of the Barbados Defense Force, past and present, for their unwavering service to our beloved country. In a lot of ways, sir, they're the unsung heroes. They're the guys, and I would have done this for a couple of years. You get, sorry? Guys, well, don't worry, there's a military thing when you talk about gals, okay? But anyway, the gentlemen and ladies of the service, who effectively roll out, well, maybe in some instances, they don't even roll out of a bed. They roll out of a cot. And they get on boats, they get into trucks, they go all up and down this country to confront danger and to keep us safe at night. When the fishing boat goes adrift, and you get that call at the Coast Guard, and there's a lady crying that says, "Oh, my brother, my husband, my son, the little boat ain't come back yet." Where the boat went, she has no idea. But she knows that you're going to go out there, despite the conditions of the sea, and you will make an effort to actually bring home those loved ones safely. The Defense Force, over the years, and I joined the Barbados Regiment at the dawn of the Defense Force. So that's a long time ago, and now all retired up. But effectively, the Defense Force, as you know, would have always been housed where it is currently, St. Anne's Fort. Regrettably, time has taken its toll on that facility. We've heard that their best efforts are being made to actually relocate the Defense Force. And I will always say this is the Army side of the Defense Force now. The other side, because I'm from the Navy, so the other side of the force to another location. And I sincerely hope, sir, that that becomes a reality for them. Their circumstances are not necessarily the best, but as I said before, there are a number of people who turn up every single day in this country, put on a uniform of all sorts of uniforms, and actually carry out the duties that are assigned to them. So whether they're policemen, nurses, post persons, Defense Force members, they all do what they're able to do. I've noticed that within the estimate, sir, that the Defense Force has moved to what is referred to as a grant status. So they now function with a grant, so the numbers are not as transparent, as there would be for other ministries. But within the concept of the Defense Force, as an institution, it has been granted and increased to the tune of $30+ million, coming from what would have been a very flat number over many years. And I would sincerely hope, sir, that without a look-see into that window of what that money is going to be used for, I would sincerely hope, though, that the vast majority of that money helps to improve their circumstances. And I will say no more on the military of Barbados, sir. Sorry? prepare for war? Sir, you know, I would recall, sir, that when I was in the service as a very young person then, Anthony Gabby Carter wrote a song and he called it Boots. And it almost became the song of the military. We had loved that song so much, huh? And he questioned in that song whether it was wise to take the taxpayers' money to feed, at those days, about 300 people, to make them paralleling fat. And all they could ever do was to hold a machine gun, right? I said, okay, King knows the lyrics to that song probably better than I do. But I think that over the years, the song has been proven wrong. And effectively, the Defense Force would have contributed to this development of this country in ways that some of us can't imagine. So that was good news for us, as I said before. I think the critical thing for them would be, and for us though, not to lose sight of what it is we are on about, is the ability to have some transparency around some of these grants and some of these numbers that are put out there. Because, you know, for example, the QH also is now on a sort of a grant footing. So when the money goes across to the QH, it just says in the estimates, and this money will be managed internally by the management of the institution. I don't necessarily understand that to the fullest in terms of having transparency in some regards, but I'm sure that there will be mechanisms that will be put in place over time, sir, that will allow for some transparency. Similarly, with institutions like the Barbados Defense Force, there will be a need as we go forward for some transparency, not necessarily to understand how many rounds of ammunition and how much guns they're purchasing and all of that to keep us safe, but more in and around their acts against the grant and whether or not it is actually providing for the things that we would like to think that it should be provided for, sir. So in closing, and I may be doing this in record time, I'm not even sure where you are, sir, with the time. 22 hours. Oh, 22 hours? So in closing, sir, I would like to say, though, that in terms of where we are, in terms of the understanding of the numbers, and in terms of understanding where we go to, that we should continue to go towards those numbers. We should continue to challenge the numbers. We should challenge the methodology used. We should implement the reporting mechanisms that allow for greater transparency. We should help with regards to whether or not we make a comment that says something is over budgeted or the budget was burst and all of those kind of things like that. These are little numbers, little things no one says that we tend to play with from time to time, sir. So when I listen to the calling programs and I listen to the one that is going on at the moment, sir, and it talks about the Carifesta, and you know, you see $4 million that was put into the estimates, and then people want to say, well, that was the budget. I never got the impression that the $4 million is the budget. I got the impression that the $4 million is put there to do certain things, right? To do certain things as it relates to, I would not going to take the guidance of the Honourable Senator. I'm speaking through the President. So I would think that there were certain things that was put there, right? Probably the failure along the way was not to have the discourse on the numbers as the numbers evolve. And that's a lesson learned for us. So I don't think that there was $4 million put there and anybody, and I never got that impression, sir, that you put $4 million in and take $30 million out, and then we calculate that as an overrun of X amount of money. I don't think that's quite the case. I think that $4 million could have been a line item, and it could have been put in the estimates at the time as a line item, as opposed to the overall cost. Yeah. But if I take my private sector hat on now, at the end of the day, in the early days, somebody would have had to give me a preliminary costing. And that preliminary costing would have been the number that would have been, people's feet would have been held to the fire for as we go forward. So a lesson learned for us in and around transparency as it relates to some of these numbers. So I think in that regard, sir, that we can effectively do much better. And we just need to find the reporting mechanisms to allow for that to be the case. And with that, sir, I am closing, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to have spoken on the appropriation bill, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Nells. Senator King.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to speak on two matters within this appropriations bill. I'm going to look at sport, and I'm also going to look at cultural heritage. Two things, sir, that for many years, in my mind, have been neglected to some extent or undervalued. And I'm going to start off by looking at the actual value of these entities. I'll begin to draw a scenario for you. In the 1980s and early 1990s, Barbados would have had probably developed some of the world's greatest cricketers. They all played for the West Indies cricket team. Now, during that period, we took the whole idea of sport for granted. We didn't see it as business. We saw it as recreation. Now in 2026, we're beginning to see where territories like India, for instance, are beginning to show you how important sport is as an economic driver. And so we have to begin the process of thinking outside of the proverbial box as to how we see sport and begin the process of seeing it as a major contributor to the economy of Barbados. How do we do this? This budget talks specifically about building out mini stadia, improving the facilities that presently exist as part and parcel of the, let's say, the beginning stages of beginning that process. Now, sir, one of the things that we have to do whilst we are talking about building out the stadia and all the other things is, you can build great facilities, but what we need to do more than anything else to ensure that we get value for the investment is that we have to find a way, maybe it could be done through the National Sports Council, but we have to create the interests of our young people in getting involved in sport. And not just seeing sport, again, I have to repeat, as recreation, but to see that there are opportunities within the sporting arena for employment. And that employment is not relegated to sportsmen. There are a number of auxiliary services that are needed. The University of the West Indies has a program where it has sports management, they have sports nutrition, they have, I believe it's sports psychology. There are all of these things that become part and parcel of today's sporting world. You also have media, merchandising, all of these areas of which we have on island the capacity to do. And so when we talk about sports, I want us to think about it in a much wider sense than what we do. We know also that this country has been struggling with NCDs for many, many years. Those of you who are in the health arena could back me up on this. It has always been said, healthy lifestyles are based on some very basic and simple principles that can help. Diet and exercise. With the facilities that we create, it gives us the opportunity not only for young people to come out and to exercise, but to get our older persons involved in physical activities, which means that the National Sports Council, and this is a suggestion that I would throw to them, must see itself as not just being involved in the schools. And I speak now from a position of knowledge of having been the minister responsible for sport, culture, and the creative economy for 3 years. In that time, I had the chance to see firsthand what was happening on the ground, which other Barbadians may not have had the opportunity to see. A classic example. Sports like squash that we don't really think top of mind when we talk about getting our kids involved in these things. I had the opportunity to go to see a tournament where you had teams from Canada, the USA, and some other place in Barbados playing squash. When I was a much younger man and involved in music, we looked forward to the Banks Hockey Festival. Because whenever that came, it brought a number of persons onto the islands. And being a musician, that means there's extra gigs for me. And so therefore, it made good sense where you can see that multiplier effect within, just bringing people here as tourists. But today, we have a number of other things that sometimes go unnoticed. One that comes top of mind is the Ninja program that happens in Featherbed Lane. I think it is usually in May that happens. Right. But that is another one that begins to become more and more popular. And if you look at what's happening, these things, when these kinds of events, when they're happening, they employ not just what you would consider the everyday persons that do the things, but you go there and you see a lot of young people who are having to help clean up and do things after it is all done. Taxis and things benefit from getting people to and fro. Transportation people do that. People who are selling condiments, all sorts of things. We have these spin-off effects. And they're basically part and parcel also of building out our tourism numbers, especially in the times when it is not what we call the tourist season. And so we have to begin the process of really taking sport seriously as part and parcel of the offerings that we have for the rest of the world. But I used to wear another hat in another place, in another time, of which I spent a number of years. That is at the government industrial schools. Now, before anyone would leave here and say that John Kay was a Dodge boy, let me please first make it right. I used to be a supervisor, and when I left there, I was the acting welfare officer at the time. I can tell you, from working in that environment, I was able to see how the sport affected not just the child who was in, but families. Families that were broken. Sometimes boys don't see the fathers, don't see them at all. I would have to take the opportunity to go to the homes and say, look, you know what, your son is playing football. Could you come and, just come and support him? And if you saw the difference between those relationships when a father turns up to watch his son play football or box or play road tennis in a competition and he does well, you begin to see how effective it is in bringing people together and communities. And so there's that part of it that we also, when we talk about whatever monies that we spend in sport, that the value goes way beyond just the numbers. There's a social part of it that you have. There's the tourism part of it. And then there's also the development part for the persons involved in it, those young men. You can imagine that you have young men in the school for various problems coming into conflict with the law. But when you get them involved in these types of things, they have the opportunity to travel outside of Barbados and represent Barbados as boxers and these kinds of things. You begin to see where pride goes up, a better sense of a direction of where they want to go. Or in some other instances with the boys who play cricket, oftentimes the exposure to other persons that they play cricket against, we played BCL cricket at the time, and getting to know persons in, let's say, and I'll be blunt, in a different category or different status within the society. That when these boys were ready to leave school, these persons were able to say, Mr. King, I got a job for this guy when he comes out. I got a job for this other guy when he comes out. That is the kind of thing, building those kinds of relationships through sport. And once we are talking about using sport also as a part and parcel of crime reduction efforts, you begin to understand firsthand what it does if done properly. And that is why I made the point that we have to not just only build the infrastructure, but we got to build the programs and help people to get more teams involved. And all the persons who have benefited from sport must play a vital role in being mentors to boys and girls and others who want to get involved in these things. Because as I said before, it's not just about the actual playing of the game, but it's what are the things that you can learn. From my own experience, I grew up with my dad being in England and me being here, right? But I got involved in lots of sports. I played football, rugby, cricket. You talk about it, right? But many times when I played those games, Christchurch League and all these things, the older fellas who were in charge of the things were your mentors. They were the persons who tell you about getting an ID card, how you go and get a job, learn a whole set of things during it. So I want us really to not just see sports and these things as like tokenism, but to really begin to zero in on how important, if we support them and do it right, there will be, so not only in the fight against crime amongst our young people, but also bringing communities together. I can tell you from my own experience, playing football, we got to play a football game in Church Village, or I play a cricket game where I come from in St. Philip. Everybody comes out. Grandmother comes out, mother comes out, cousins, everybody come out to cheer you on and to be involved in it. It brings communities together. It brings people together, and I made a lot of friends. I have friends from playing rugby at law school in the 70s, who are my friends today, just from playing rugby against them, from Harrison College, Corrigan Parry, all about lifelong friendships made through sport. And so, sir, any investment that we make into sport cannot be argued for or against based on just the dollars and cents. It would not make any sense, pardon the pun. We all know what Cricket World Cup 2024 generated for Barbados. I don't have to tell you. It's the central bank put out that information as Mr. Waters, Senator Waters knows, and so therefore I will not have to repeat it for you because I know that you know. But the point is this. that if we can do that with ICC cricket, which is done by a global entity, just think what Barbados can do if we were the ones putting on the tournaments. If we start tournaments that are our tournaments, tournaments that we own the intellectual property to, that we own the rights for broadcasting to. Just think about it. The amounts of money that can be garnered from us just owning these events. And it is something, therefore, that we must begin to think about in terms of how we view the National Sports Council and what it does and what it supports. Because even amateur sporting events bring in tourists, person who you probably used to play a game professionally, somebody who just likes to play a game and travel and come to do things. We have the opportunity to build out these particular things in a completely different way. What it takes is for us to have the confidence to do it. It will not happen overnight. We have to do it step by step. But I think this year, when we look at these estimates and look to see what they say they're doing, we're in the right direction. I want to now speak a bit on cultural heritage, because oftentimes that, again, is another avenue which is undervalued. Yet, in our own homes, for any of us who delve into history or anything like that, you go to television and you watch period movies that are made in other countries. What are they based on? Oftentimes, real life stories or events that would have happened and people embellish them. Barbados has endless stories upon which we can build, create movies, create documentaries, sell merchandise based on these things, but we have to see them as having value. The problem has been and continues to be that we don't appreciate what we have or what we know as culture, both tangible or intangible. Classic example, I remember being in Jamaica, 1989, Mona, and going out shopping just to look around. The first time something hit me, I saw a book in a store, Speak Like a Jamaican, and it had all of the Jamaican patois in it, and then it had what the English parts of it says and what you say if you say it like a Jamaican. And it dawned on me that even language, the value of language, we've not been able to do the same thing as part and parcel of what we do in the tourism sector. Then we have a number of monuments and other places of significance in Barbados. There's a traveler who travels specifically for that kind of thing. They're also known to be a higher end and a longer staying traveler to those types of destinations. And if we're beginning the process of building out these particular spots, we can, again, increase revenue across the island. Like, many times, you will find that people will tell you, oh, on my bucket list, I want to go to see the pyramids. I don't have the number of people who have passed in this world to go to Egypt to see the pyramids. But I know that there got to be hundreds of millions of people who have done it, and hundreds of millions of people who put it on their bucket list, so to speak, to go to see the pyramids, the Great Pyramids. So I am saying that we in Barbados have stories to tell. We have places for people to actually come and see things that we ourselves might take for granted. But we've got to begin to change the mindset as to how we value these assets that we have. And sir, I always think that with our artisans, that we've missed the opportunity again for our creatives to be a part of that particular sector where, again, they can build and create things that people can purchase. And with all of the things that are happening for us now, a lot of people spend a lot of money by just going online and going to, I won't call the names of it, but a number of places where people go and buy stuff. So it means we don't have to be like waiting for someone to come to us to give them a product from Barbados, especially one that has some sort of cultural significance or whatever. You can do things and ship them out. You know, the platforms are there. Our authors are the only ones that I can think of who have been able to take advantage of the platforms that are out there, where you can go and get books that have been produced in Barbados online, right? So we have to continue to build out these things. I'm very proud to see that the Minister for Sport talked a lot about what he is going to do. Unfortunately, the minister who's responsible for cultural heritage has not had a chance to really speak as such on a lot of the things that he is going to do. But I'm actually working alongside of him. And if we are able to deliver on a lot of the things that we're seeking to do, one of those is the whole engagement with the diaspora, and also looking at Pan-Africanism and how do we connect with those persons to get them again to Barbados as tourists, but also to see what other investments and other things can come from those engagements. And so, sir, I believe that we are at a point now where we have the time to start to build out these things properly. We have the expertise on island, that goes without saying, but I think what we need now is for the general public to have a complete different view of how we see sport. We get families, especially, I can speak from my own experience. You know, going to school at law school, for you to come out of law school at that particular point in time, to tell anyone that you wanted to be a musician, it was like, I guess the word I was using is sacrilege. You know, people want to know, well, what kind of madman John King is. You understand? But we have lived to see that one young lady coming out of Comere has now become a multi-millionaire, dare say a billionaire. A billionaire. And everyone is in awe. And now we're beginning to probably break down those types of barriers that we had in the past. But I dare say I want to make the point that within these industries, cultural industries, culture itself, sporting things, there are so many different levels. And not everyone is going to be at the top, the billionaire types. But, especially with sport, I'm going to say this. Because there are so many levels of, let's say, leagues around the world, it means that if we produce good cricketers, good footballers, good netball players, whatever the sport is, there is room for them in various levels. Everybody can't play for Barcelona or Man United and that sort of stuff, but they can play in lesser leagues. They can play in lesser leagues and still make money, still be paid as professional athletes. And this is the mindset that we have to create going forward, because no country on the face of the planet has been able yet to provide 100% employment for the people of that country. If you show me one, I show you my coffee. Not happening. And so therefore, have to begin the process of looking into, again, I can talk about the school system, as to how we view those children who do not show the kind of aptitude that you want for academics, but may show an aptitude for sport or discipline like dance or art or whatever. Our job is to facilitate their growth and expansion by providing all that we can and that is necessary to get them to the next level of whatever the endeavor is. I had the opportunity to go to Cuba also, to study also their cultural programs and to see how they deal with things like repairing old buildings and different things like that. And you see the difference between what happens there and what happens in the rest of the Caribbean. Imagine 2019, I visited Cuba. The world's premier ballet dancer, male, was from Cuba. In 2019, he was from Cuba, right? And if you ever get the opportunity to visit that island and to even interact with persons, then you begin to understand why they are good in sports against all odds, why they're good in creative industries against all odds. And then you even begin to understand why against all odds they continue to produce the greatest doctors that the world has ever seen. It's all about mindset. It's how you value things. And I believe that we can do the same. We've done it before in the game of cricket. We've created the world's, we say all the time, the world's greatest cricketer in Sir Garfield Sobers. I want to carry it a little further to say that we've created some of the world's greatest cricketers, and probably, and I don't know if I can call names, but I will do so, sir, if you allow me to. I believe that young Hayley Matthews, when her cricketing career is finished, will go down in history as the greatest female cricketer the world has ever seen also. And so the examples are there with very little, and I must be honest, with very little input from us. These persons have excelled across the globe. Imagine what would happen when we take the initiatives like we are taking now to actually invest, to make them, or to give them a better chance at success. And so, sir, I believe that I don't have to try to convince anyone in this room or outside of it of the value of the inputs that are going into sport. What I would like to suggest, though, is that, again, I make this call because I know as a young man, I was mentored and tutored by older guys in my community. And I often hear people talk about, oh, boys on the block and this thing. Now, it's on the block too. But the block had a different culture. The block had a culture that if things begin to happen on the block that you as a teenager ain't supposed to be in, you had to leave and go home. And if you played the fool and one person had to get a slap on the block, you can't go home and tell your mother, but somebody slapped me, because first thing you want to know why they had to slap you. And then by the time that conversation is finished with the person as to why they had to slap you, is another set of slaps you can get. This culture. You know, it pains me sometimes to when somebody like myself, who was actually born in England, has got to come in here to tell Barbadians about the good things that they did in the past and how we reach the stage where we throw the baby with the bath water, minding other people. If you do not know what works for you or what has worked for you in the past, any adjustments supposed to be made, you are the one supposed to make the adjustments. Not somebody telling you that you gotta make the adjustments. You have to think for yourself. And so therefore I send out this appeal to men in the society more so than anybody else. We have to get up now. If these young guys in our communities are to better themselves, can't be afraid to talk with people. You can't turn a blind eye to it and believe that it will not reach you, because it will if it goes unchecked. You have to get involved. And if sport is the way that we're going to tackle some of the problems, especially with crime, getting boys, young men in particular, away from what they're finding themselves in now, then we gotta have strong clubs. And you're not gonna get strong clubs from the lack of involvement for older people with experience. You're gonna need that experience. You need that interaction, you need that mentoring. And so I want, before I close, just to take the opportunity to commend, especially, and I listened very carefully when the Senator wanted to make a reference to regathering, but I'm gonna make my point on regathering now. Regathering was not just an exercise in spending money or just putting on events. During that, I had a chance to go across the length and breadth of this country. And in St. Lucie, I was so impressed where the demand for cricket teams so high in St. Lucie. They got intermediate division teams, under whatever else. They got so many teams, young men involved in the game. You can look forward to them being the next generation of professional cricketers. But they have a program where, you know, they have to have, then they just got a one team, 2 and 3 teams, and still got to go do more because more and more young men are getting involved. Cricket is our game, like it or not. We could try with all kinds of other things, but we've had success in cricket. And I always am a firm believer that the things that you are good at are the things that you put your effort into, because you've shown that you can do it. And if we do that, then that can help to pay for what other investments goes with the other things. And sir, I just want to say that I support all that this government is trying to do through sports and through cultural heritage. And I want to invite Barbadians all across this country, and I say it one more time, especially our men. I am 62 years old this year. I can't even believe it myself. 62. I would love to be able to see that the guns, the violence, and all of these things come to an end. Not just because we say so, but because we actively get involved through mediums such as sport, culture, and these types of things. And with those very few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Stoker.
Mr. President, first allow me to do what may be unorthodox, but I do admire the candor in which Senator King spoke. I must admit, in many respects, you would recognize that Senator King shared some advice to government in which he is a part of. And I do appreciate and share some of his sentiments, which you will hear in my presentation this afternoon, sir. Your Honor, I rise to offer my position on this Appropriation Bill 2026. Sir, I'm mindful that debates of this nature ought not to resemble theater. I'm mindful that it is not a spectacle. Sir, I prefer to bring substance over hype in this place, sir. Sir, it is the duty of careful work, sir, of a craftsman, laying the foundation of a house. Sir, for no builder, sir, begins by admiring the roof. One must look at the ground beneath, because it should not remain unsettled. Sir, the strength of the structure depends always on the soundness of its base. The strength of the structure depends always on the soundness of its base. It is in this spirit, sir, that this afternoon, as I said, I come without the slightest inclination toward theatrics or grandstanding, and without any desire to dance around the seriousness of this debate. Sir, my good friend, Senator Walters, I listened to him attentively for the 2 hours that was extended to him. To my amusement, but sir, I yielded to your wisdom, as you stated earlier. Sir, but I come with a heart, sir, that listens, a heart that feels the pulse of the people in Barbados and that of the country. And sir, with a mind compelled to critically assess this appropriation bill, which has been placed before us, and in many respects, sir, what the future of this country holds. Sir, I said, and allow me to reiterate, for the benefit of complete understanding, and for those who might not have heard the first time, the strength of the structure depends always on the soundness of its base. I wish to state, Mr. President, that I find this budget to have been to be a demonstration in disciplined financial management. Sir, I think the government is not deaf to the cry of the people of this country. The truth is that in many corners of this society, there's a cry. Sir, that cry, pain in the pockets of many individuals because of the global economic environment. So I think the government recognizes that Barbadians are feeling the uneasiness in their daily lives, and therefore, a responsible government, as you would presume, would do what is necessary to bring about a sense of relief and to offer a helping hand or sense of support. Sir, I'm not an economist, and I rely on that of the independence of the lecturers and those in academia at the University of the West Indies and the other spheres, sir, that, sir, even when it brings a sense of discomfort for members who may sit in the other place, sir, it's important for us to respect the independent voices in this country. And sir, while I will allow my goodly Senator, Dr. Honourable, to defend that of the institution of which he's a part of, sir, I would merely want to lend my voice by commending those Barbadians who still see it as their duty to share as public intellectuals their views on matters, including that of the budget, sir. Sir, but even though I am not an economist, Sir, there is a saying that some of the best economists are those who reside in our communities and those who will convene on an evening at a local shop to enjoy a grog, sir. That they are the ones who are able to dissect a lot of the financial matters in this country. Sir, I think most would conclude, by way of the conversations that I've heard, government has done a commendable job at the macro level with the economy. And there are some concerns when it comes to the micro level. And sir, yes, we hear the central bank reports, as was alluded to earlier, sir. And we recognize that our country, on paper, is on a positive trajectory. But sir, like a cricket ball, everything can look the same while that ball is new. And after a few knocks, sir, that ball, the shine is gone, and it takes a different shape. So too with these financial reports sometimes. They look pretty when they come, they sound pretty when they're presented, but when they get a few knocks, the shine gone. So, Your Honor, I am conscious that this presentation here this afternoon, and my presentation, I have to dissect matters from the point of view of which I stand. I am conscious that in here, sir, I am among men and women of great experience, sir. Yet, it is often the task of a younger voice to remind seasoned minds that time alone does not settle every argument. You and I know, sir, Your Honor, from time to time, even the most seasoned sailors must be reminded which direction the tide is turning. Sir, Barbados is approaching 60 years. 60 years of independence. Symbolically, we too may be facing a turning tide. Sir, in society, the society in which we live, and quite frankly, the world today, is turning also. You see it every time you turn on the television and you watch what is happening around the world, sir. These are troubling times. Months ago, sir, right next door to us, we had an intervention that was quite unusual. And sir, I want to proclaim, if that is necessary, for the third time, and for the avoidance of all doubt, and so, sir, that it may be digested well by my goodly Senator Trim, sir. The strength of the structure depends always on the soundness of its base. Sir, I want to encourage that government looks at getting back to basics. This country, like most in the region, has a structural issue. And I want to advance the notion that too often we see the grandeur, the lofty grandeur of political machinations, ideas, sir, that often, can be seen as quite fascinating. And, sir, there is a growing concern with government's capacity to be able to deliver or implement, and to implement at a standard of excellence. Sir, this is not peculiar to Barbados. Let me first say that. Sir, there are a few academics who I have been studying over the past few months, particularly to understand some of the challenges that we not only face here in the region, sir, but globally. Sir, there is a widely regarded political economist. In 2014, sir, he published a book called The Political Order and Political Decay, Sir Francis Fukuyama. And no, I'm very careful, very careful. Sir, it is interesting, sir, because he promotes the view that development depends on the strength and functionality of institutions that are capable of implementing policy effectively and fairly. Sir, the first of three foundational pillars he spoke to is the state of capacity. Your Honor, in my considered view, consecutive governments in this country, not this particular administration alone, have had challenges with implementation deficits. And sir, I'm surprised that by now, one of the senators sitting on the government side is not waving their red record. But, sir, I want to turn my attention to that of a presentation by the Caribbean Development Bank. Sir, several presidents of the CDB, Hyginus Leon, you heard it from the former acting president of the CDB, in that of Isaac Solomon, sir. You've heard it from the president, current president, in that of Barbadian Daniel Bess. But, sir, these concerns were raised by the CDB as far back as 2019. And, sir, I will make it a document of the House, a statement issued on November the 6th, 2019, by that of the then president, the late Dr. Warren Smith. And, sir, he said, moving the needle on solutions to our region's perennial challenges require a relentless commitment to implementation, starting with a cultural shift that encourages increased accountability. Sir, he went on to state that we often joke about Caribbean people always being late, but time is money, undermining our capacity to deliver goods and services in a timely manner, and undercutting our ability to compete based on low cost and high quality. Sir, I've heard it from these academics, sir. And in truth, right here in this country, we must admit, we have some capacity challenges. Sir, it metamorphosizes into a implementation deficit, sir. And so we fall short of that standard of excellence that we expect in this country, one that we have come accustomed to. And so I know it is quite often you hear an honorable member in the other place saying that we must be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. But sir, my grandmother shares a different opinion. She always tells me, don't bite off more than you can chew. And sir, I appreciate these grand ideas that are presented sometimes. I understand the trajectory in which the country is anxiously undertaken. But sir, I want to implore that we also get back to the very basics. Sir, I heard the goodly senator spoke about data centers in Greenland, St. Andrew. I learned, sir, from the explanations that it should include digital infrastructure that will include artificial intelligence that I'm sure that my goodly senator here will enjoy, he would love to see. Sir, it would include cloud services and green electricity. Sure, it sounds good. And I welcome the idea. But if we cannot get the very basics right, when, sir, very often in this country, you are having cybersecurity breaches, it suggests to me that the priority must be getting the basics right first, instead of chasing the lofty grandeur of that of a data center. Sir, I heard the comments also about flyovers, sir. And I must tell you, having done the research, I believe that flyovers may be necessary. And I could be in some sense contradicting myself. But sir, as much as we are looking for flyovers, we have to take into consideration our inability to get the very basics of road infrastructure corrected in this country. And sir, there's not a single senator in here who can speak with a level of authority to say that road infrastructure in this country has not been taking longer than we would have hoped. Sir, there's a bridge in particular in my area in St. Peter, sir, Worley. People call it the farm bridge that connects you at Haymans and leads you into Spikestown, sir. Sure, that bridge was closed since February 2023 on the premise initially that it was because of some water main burst. Sir, that bridge still cannot be repaired. Sir, I traveled through an area called Indian Ground, sir. And that is the roughest road. Listen, sir, I have a friend who was visiting from overseas recently, and she wanted to go to a bar that has a nice view out there. Sir, I couldn't take her across there because, sir, at the time, she was expecting, and the roads are so rocky, I don't know how you could carry some person across there. Sir, you can't eat and then drive back across that road because you shake up everything. Sir, I further like to even look at, sir, the road at Darview, sir, in St. Joseph. There are some youngsters who play cricket in that area. And sir, all the artery roads, sir, have essentially collapsed bridges. And sir, even up to late last year, we heard about the comments about the inability to access the area easily, even for that of emergency purposes. Sir, so while I support the idea of flyovers, and I support the idea of using flyovers to address the challenges we have with traffic congestion, sir, there's equally a need for us to simply get the basics right. Sir, I have listened to even discussions about that of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation and that of the reform and restructuring that has taken place at that institution. And sir, I note with concern, I registered that concern, in fact, of the whimsical fantasy of that of moving towards ATSC technology, sir, that to my mind would have essentially restricted access to Barbadians, the very few Barbadians who actually still watch the state broadcaster. And sir, we heard about all of these changes happening at CBC and the investment that was taken, sir. But sir, from where I stand, if we are looking at, restructuring, sir, we must first deal with the very basic aspects of what restructuring looks like. And I add to that, sir, because CBC has a content issue. Sir, CBC has a content issue. How many of us turn on CBC to watch it still? Most people use the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, the other platforms that they may choose, because it has greater variety. And what is that variety? Sir, the options to be able to go online and watch something that is showing that you prefer. Sir, as far as I'm concerned, CBC put its first nail in the coffin when Days of Our Lives closed down. When they pulled the plug on Days of Our Lives, everything else, people turned off the TVs for good. And I know that very few people, sir, will go to watch the 7 o'clock news, but some also share concerns about that too, because we have a perfect combination here now in this Senate, sir, of all political parties who have used it to their benefit from time to time. And therefore, the ability to watch news that is credible has been now placed under the microscope of scrutiny. Sir, but I think there is a need for us to look at what we are showing on the state broadcaster first and foremost, sir. Grand restructuring that amounted to little more than window dressing, sir, name change is what we recognize, sir. The structural challenges are clear. Data indicates that the radio stations of CBC are all underperforming. Every single radio station at CBC is underperforming. You have a case where, sir, you have 3 radio stations currently at the state broadcaster. And the only reason people turn to one of those stations is because of news. And sir, I question then, why are we propping up 2 other stations to be able at the end of the day, just for the sake of saying that we have 2 other radio stations in this country? Sir, we have heard the discussions, and we know that from the time of Prime Minister Affer, there was an inclination to move to privatizing the CBC. We know that then the Democratic Labour Party took office, and that plan was shelved. But I believe, sir, the time has come for us to look at exploring a public-private partnership with CBC and looking at home first rather than jumping the gun and trying to go overseas. Sir, one of its main revenue drivers was that of MCTV, and that has now become obsolete. As I mentioned earlier, people still have MCTV. People still have the boxes. The truth is, people are carrying in those boxes every day. So it requires for us to seriously look at the broader issue. I am not going to get into that of reforming state-owned enterprises, but it requires for us to seriously start prioritizing our revenue, our expenditure, sir. Because the truth is, I don't see why we are dumping money into things that clearly are not functioning. I'm sure that Senator Cummings would benefit from the couple extra $1 million in health care to relieve some of the challenges in the accident and the emergency. I am sure, sir, that people in this country would prefer that you spend those couple extra $1 million in addressing road infrastructure. Sir, I'm sure that you can look at that when it comes to transportation and garbage collection. And sir, this is not an indictment on government. I hope that the chatter and laughter does not reflect such. Because certainly, sir, I know it is easy to offend. But if sobriety is the order of the day, and some would take the time to truly understand what is being presented, humor will not be their response. Sir, it is time for us to get the basics right. And so after taking the winding staircase, I wish to acknowledge on the point of, from a financial perspective, I think that government has done a good job in being able to support the average Barbadian when it comes to being able to cope with circumstances. But sir, I believe that we need to look at some of the fundamental issues, and in doing so, it requires of us to not go on a road trip of excitement, a scenic tour, when really and truly we could just simply do the things that are the very basic. Sir, at a deeper level, I am compelled to address my concern, sir, with something that follows a natural domino effect from implementation. Sir, that of accountability. Sir, I stand to lay the facts as plainly and directly as I can. Sir, I'm guided by a refrain often spoken by a good friend and brother: to explain is to expose. I do not seek to expose her for any embarrassment, nor to score political points. I shall leave that for Senator Walters and Senator Goodrich. If, sir, I cannot be honest in this chamber, then I have lost my right to stand in this place. Sir, my duty is to explain from my point of view to the country, and in fulfilling my duty, the consequences may inevitably reach the government as well. Sir, I've thought long and hard about whether or not I would address the matter of Carifesta. I've thought long and hard because I am one who believes that Carifesta was a good initiative. I benefited, sir, from Carifesta. And I am not afraid, sir, to be transparent. I know others have a challenge in doing such. And sir, I therefore suggest to you, I can give you the invoice. Out of that $31 million, it's 35.7, 35.7, sir, I got $1,500. And sir, I got that from being an honest individual, as a cultural practitioner, playing my trade, sir. So I have no shame in saying such. And sir, I want to say that I don't believe that there was any wrongdoing when it comes to the spending of Carifesta money. Sir, but $35 million is not an insignificant figure. I think that government, in embarking upon the Carifesta initiative, should have spent their time articulating from the outset that $4 million was the initial cost to get it mobilized, the mobilization fee. Sir, I believe that government spent too long before they come back to the people and explain what was the total value spent, or what was the allocation. Sir, I heard in a section of the media, a member who sits in the other place state that the money has already been transferred. So it means that government already knew the amount of money it took to cover the deficit. Sir, I also took umbrage by a comment made by the accounting officer, the gazetted accounting officer for Carifesta, who essentially, and forgive me, I'm not defending Senator Archer, sir. He will defend him himself. But as a young man, sir, I was surprised to come to an understanding that the response that was later retracted, sir, under the premise that it was falsified, that Senator Archer could respond to the comments because he was on the board of the National Cultural Foundation at the time, sir, Carifesta was happening, and he was fully appraised, sir. Accounting officers are there for a reason. They are there to ensure continuity. Sir, on the day after the election, some would have hoped that the outcome would have been quite different, and they would assume that they would have been sworn into office. That accounting officer was there to ensure that there was a sense of continuity. There was a sense of continuity. Sir, but when I heard that accounting officer, now come this morning in the section of the press, and the standing order, sir, don't allow for me to quote from newspaper articles. I'm so guided, sir. Senator King, sir, stood earlier and talked about a World Cup. And he was able to report on the World Cup because the multinational entity called Cricket West Indies published the economic impact study. I don't want to hear about this went to 31 went to this hotel and 3 went to, that's not a proper report. And sir, they could put the $1,500 that I get in there too. But sir, I want to say, with Carifesta having taken such significant funding to put on, as I said, it was a good initiative. Sir, cultural practitioners in this country benefited from Carifesta. Anyone who says anything different, sir, that is a lie. But we need to have a proper economic impact study, sir, to come to a greater understanding of where the figures, what's the benefit of putting on a Carifesta. Because I'm sure, sir, that we will want to do such again. But, sir, without understanding where we are going to allocate funding, sir, whether we are going to invest more in supporting local artists through training, sir, whether we are going to put on more workshops, sir, whether we are going to put on more showcases, sir, that economic impact study will allow us to know, even from which countries persons came from and supported. Visitors' arrivals, sir. It needs to be paired with that of what the Barbados Statistical Service, sir, presents, and that of the Central Bank of Barbados. Sir, on another note, I will note that the $157 million in capital works projects for Carifesta House, sir, as well as, what thing up Newton name now? National Performing Arts Center, sir. I get it out of you. A National Performing Arts Center, sir, as well as that of Carifesta House, sir, would have cost significant amount of money. Sir, I appreciate that these are venues that will benefit us in the long run. Sir, I just want to state for the record that I do have a broader challenge, not with this administration or any particular administration, but sir, with the upkeep of facilities. When we invest significantly, $157 million in building out a fabulous entertainment facility in that of the Botanical Gardens, where, sir, my now famous Pickety Crop song, Don't Forget Me, was sung, or sang rather. I, sir, I'm of the opinion, sir, that, sir, give me a little protection, please. Sir, in all seriousness.
I honestly thought that just like the crowd in the Botanical Gardens, they were cheering. So I didn't interrupt them.
Sir, the truth is, no, in all honesty, the venues are great, and I just would like to hope that government spends some time in ensuring that they maintain these properties, sir. There's quite often deterioration that happens when you don't upkeep facilities over a period of time. And sir, that leads to certainly the inability to access those facilities. And sir, we are seeing it even with the aquatic center in the area of sport, sir. But if time permits, sir, I will touch that at a later point. Sir, on the 20th of April, 1998, Barbados established what is known as the Order of National Heroes. Two of the most significant global figures who have been appointed by the Chancellor, sir, the Right Excellent Sir Garfield St. Auburn Sobers, who, sir, will celebrate his 90th birthday this year, sir, on the 28th of July. And, sir, we celebrate with Sir Garfield Sobers, and I hope that government will do what is necessary to mark this milestone. Sir, Her Excellency Robin Rihanna Fenty was subsequently named as a national hero on Barbados becoming a republic. Sir, it is no secret that these two individuals, the former, the world's greatest cricketer the world has ever seen, captained the West Indies team, only to retire before 1975, so he would not have led the 1975 World Cup team, which was then captained by Sir Clive Lloyd, sir, that won the World Cup. But it is because of the contribution that Sir Garfield Sobers made that West Indies team made a significant mark at the 1975 and 1979 World Cups. Sir, and Robin Rihanna Fenty, Her Excellency, sir, is easily one of the most identifiable global icons, and sir, she comes from the cultural and creative industries. Sir, therefore, you could appreciate that given my background in culture and working with the multinational organization Cricket West Indies, you would appreciate why I am passionate about both sport and culture. Sir, I have concluded that the National Cultural Foundation has outlived its current purpose in its current state. I've come to this conclusion with several academics, practitioners in the field, sir, and investors sharing this opinion. Sir, when I was 15 years old, I was called by Dr. the Most Honourable Anthony Mighty Gabby Carter to his house. Sir, I went that evening after school, and he said that a gentleman wanted to meet with me. I didn't know who that man was at the time, sir. And sir, because I was singing Jackie Opal's music for quite some time, he wanted to introduce me to a man who played a significant role in that of Jackie Opal's career and that of Elambe Motley, sir. Sir, in a previous state, Elambe and I went on to share many conversations, and one opinion that has stuck with me, sir, was that the National Culture Foundation was created in 1983. And sir, it was created at the time. It was considered to be the greatest asset to the advancement of the cultural and creative industries. And that then, when we spoke, as like now, it is emerging to be the sector's greatest adversary. Sir, this is not an assault on the institution. This is not assault, sir, or a call for the goodly senator to respond. That is his desire. So be it. Sir, this is not an attack, sir, either on those who work at the institution. But, sir, what we must now confront, that the institution in its current state needs modernizing. And the capacity needed to expand to deliver its mandate, sir, I am not convinced that it can deliver on its current state, in the current circumstances. First thing, sir, the National Culture Foundation has become the biggest promoter in this country. And instead of focusing on the mandate as outlined in the act that established that institution, sir, that of preserving and protecting culture and heritage, it finds itself, in my opinion, contradicting that mandate. Sir, I pay special attention to that of crop over. I don't know how they come up with these names, sir. It first started as SOCA 3.0 or 4.0. Sir, last year it was SOCA 5.0. I expect this year they're going to call it SOCA 6.0. And I assume they're going to call it that merely on the premise that Barbados is celebrating its 60th year of independence. But, sir, it has become a decibel effect promoter in this country. And instead of returning to the Cahoblapop brand, sir, and incentivizing the bands on the road, sir, instead of being a string and feather spectacle, sir, which for some, sir, there's a market for that niche, sir. But people travel to festivals around the world, carnivals in particular, for authenticity. Sir, you do not want a second version of Trinidad Carnival. People go to a country to immerse themselves in that unique culture and heritage. Yet instead of returning, sir, to Cahoblapop, sir, instead of looking at what they experienced on Grand Kadooment Day, sir, we are in this cycle of tinkering, sir. And I note with care that last time, sir, before I go to that, there are foreign promoters, sir, even who come now to Barbados. Nice breakfast fairs. I've seen a few persons at them too. I've been. Kadooment bands, sir, with the involvement now of sir, strings and feathers, as I mentioned. Sir, and something that I'm very passionate about is ensuring that we protect some elements of the heritage, as I mentioned. Sir, 4-day morning, the 4-day jump up is one of these. Sir, the record will show in cyberspace that Senator Trim agrees with me. The 4-day jump up, sir, now finds itself competing with private jumps. Sir, one must have a conscience. I cannot decide to go to Jamaica on the day that there's Reggae Fest and decide that I am putting on a Bajan Fair. I cannot go to Trinidad on the same day there is Monday Mass and decide that I am putting on a Bajan Fair either. Sir, we must protect what is uniquely ours. And sir, it is important, sir, that we protect those who invest their money, sir, in putting on a 4-day band to be a part of the cultural experience and the heritage experience that is Barbados. So I find it a colossal travesty that you could have Tipsy now deciding on the day of 4-day jam that they are putting on a private fair. And sir, sponsored by the National Culture Foundation, sponsored by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., sir, I find it to be a flagrant assault on our culture. And sir, I am sure that if my statements were inaccurate, that by now somebody would have jumped up and say on a point of order.
On a point of order, sir.
What do you raise?
On a point of order, sir.
And what's the point of order?
Senator Slocum is desperately misleading the House. Desperately. The NCF, I'm not sure about any other government entity, definitely is not sponsoring anything other than the regular 4-day morning bands and potentially the private jump, sir.
Thank you, Senator Archer.
Sir,
Please continue.
Sir, I'm so guided. However, sir, it is now necessary, sir, for me to correct the record. Because, sir, on consecutive years, since 2000, since Burna Boy first came to this country, that entity, sir, was sponsored by the National Culture Foundation. And it was sponsored by the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., sir. And sir, while this event in particular, now being hosted on 4-day morning jump up, sir, it is by the same entity. And sir, the truth is, the head of that entity, sir, is a foreign promoter. I have nothing, sir, against individuals who come to this country, who want to enjoy the opportunities that this country presents.
Senators, please let me hear Senator Slocum in silence. Thank you.
But sir, thank you, sir. It is true that these events tamper with the cultural fabric of our country. And sir, we must do what is necessary to protect that, sir. Sir, we need to look back at exploring cavalcades and bringing them back to the forefront of our festival, sir. Sir, we need to return to a party monarch. And sir, the truth is, as a cultural practitioner, there was an indication in the last year, it was held 2019, that it was being hosted to improve the quality of music. It was not being hosted, sir, to ensure that we could invest more in improving the quality of music that we get for Propover, sir. And that, sir, has borne no fruit. In fact, sir, I think the music has been challenged by the mere fact that there's no competition. Sir, I would find myself not being who I am if I cannot stand on this floor, sir, and speak without fear or speak without the chastisement, sir. I'm not concerned, sir, about the dissenting voices, sir. But I am of the opinion that we need to seriously look at the Crop Over Festival. If we are going to stand up to the other festivals, the other carnivals, sir, that are growing in this region, that of St. Lucia Carnival, sir, we recognize that Grenada offers a quite unique experience. Vincy Mass, sir, is growing very rapidly. And sir, the numbers are there to reflect that. So I make a shift towards another area. In December 2025, I published an examination of the dancehall culture in Barbados. And dancehall music culture, sir, which has now overshadowed soca and eclipsed every other genre, sir, in this country. So I want to highlight the poetic brilliance of a young recording artist, sir. Permit me to evoke his name, Doje. A young man who has recently released his album, Boys to Men. And sir, on the top 100 charts, in the top 10 in Barbados, sir, he has 7 out of the 10 songs most streamed in this country today. Sir, including number 1 with Too Bad, and my personal favorite, sir, Karma. And I look around, I know that there are very few individuals, sir, including probably yourself, who may be familiar with his music. But sir, this is a young man whose music is produced by Nick Jr., a young producer that I have great admiration and respect for, sir. And also on that top 100 chart, sir, we have a young man who lives a stone's throw away from my St. Peter residence, and that of Master T. Sir, Master T occupies position number 2 on the charts with his song T, and number 8 with Catfish. Sir, Master T has shown that even though he has a physical disability in that he has an amputation, sir, he has defined himself as not a good disabled artist. Sir, he is simply a good artist, and he serves as a role model for many young Barbadians today, as much as Doje does, sir. I believe that there's a need for our cultural institutions to look at ways in which they can support these artists, export their talent internationally, regionally and internationally, sir. Sir, there is a publication called Creative Truth to Power, 2017 publication, sir. And it was published by Barbados' now ambassador to the UAE, Dr. Annalie Bab, sir, Dr. Alison Leacock, who is the director of the NTI, sir, along with a Scottish researcher, published this study. And they indicated, sir, then that many of the practitioners had lost faith in that system. So I believe that we need to get back to this. Sir, there are 2 points I'd like to raise before I close. Sir, I want to commend the government on the incentives brought for the film sector. Sir, it is no secret that for more than 30 years, those in the film and the audiovisual sector have been calling for incentives for the film sector to allow us to compete internationally. Government has done what no administration in this country has had the audacity to do: bring incentives for the sector. And sir, I want to, if you permit, commend the former minister who held the portfolio for culture, and that of the current minister and the Minister of Finance, sir, for ensuring that it came in the form of a cash rebate. Sir, a cash rebate essentially allows us not only to compete against our brothers and sisters in this region, sir, but compete on a global stage. A cash rebate amounting, sir, to a maximum of 40% is significant. And sir, this essentially transforms the way how culture is seen and how the film sector is seen in Barbados. I'm aware, sir, that in our negotiations, the Barbados Film and Television Association with government at the time would have also lobbied for a film fund to be established. And the previous office holder would have indicated that this is a part of the soon-to-be established Film Commission. And I want to commend that. The final point that I want to raise, sir, before I close, is that of the indication that government will be providing an extension to the Tourism Development Act for hotels in this country. Sir, it will be remiss of me as a cultural practitioner, having met, sir, over the past few days with entertainers in this country who work in the hotel sector, sir, who have indicated that while we welcome opportunities for the tourism sector to expand, sir, I am particularly concerned by the way how entertainers are treated by the hotels in this country. Sir, big brand names on the West Coast have entertainers, sir, changing in a closet that has mop buckets and it has broomsticks, sir, and detergents. Sir, that is not the way how entertainers should be treated. And while I acknowledge that governments will continue to support, as rightfully, sir, those in the tourism sector, it is not right at the same time for these hotels not to treat properly those who work in the entertainment sector. And sir, I know that that fight was taken by the Barbados Workers Union on behalf, sir, of those who are employees, sir, within the sector. But sir, I recognize that this is a serious issue. And I hope, sir, because I've conducted a study that shows that 63% of hotels, sir, in this country pay entertainers below a desirable wage, sir. Sir, a four-piece band in this country performing for 2 hours is getting $300 to split up amongst themselves. Sir, it is a dastardly deed that must not be entertained. There are hotels in this country, sir, who are treating entertainers like outright dirt. And it is not right to see how some people are struggling to make it by.
I'd like to raise the point of order.
I want to rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not accustomed to this space, so apologies. But this is not
I take that you're on a point of
a
order.
point of order.
Yes.
Appreciate it. This is not a radio program. It's not a theater. So if you're quoting statistics, bring the facts, submit the data. Don't just speak to the general public and make them believe that you ran an actual survey. Bring the data, show which properties, which businesses, just like you pinpoint to the event company without them being able to defend themselves, because it's disrespectful. And if it's the main economic driver.
I think you can't use the point of order to make an alternative speech.
Sir,
Senator Slocum, please.
So,
You,
point is to just
I'm
submit
taking
the
the point,
data.
I'm taking the point, you're challenging, you're asking for more details on the source of the data, and that's it.
Yes,
But
please.
you can't make alternative points.
No,
Save that for your speech.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
No, I will.
Thank you very
save it.
much. Thank you
I
very
like
much,
going
Senator
last.
Ford. Yeah, thank you. Senator Slocum.
sir, I hope that I can reclaim the few minutes that I was left with. Sir,
Senator Slocum, please leave, please leave the chair to direct those matters.
Sir,
Please, continue.
as I wrap up, sir. Sir, I can assure you, sir, the Honourable Senator has asked me to publish the data. Sir, I want to say to you and this chamber, sir, that data will be published all across social media tomorrow morning. And sir, I want you to know that it would have been in his interest not to call for those hotels. Because if I have to publish those hotel names, sir, this country will be in an uproar. Sir, there are people who will say that I'm a loose cannon, sir. But I want to say when it comes to entertainers in this country, respect is due. And sir, I can show you very quickly, a loose cannon, sir, will easily, sir, become a nuclear bomb. Sir, I'm much obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Slocum, for that explosive ending.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to revert to public business.
Presentation papers. Sir, permission to revert to presentation of papers. Presentation of papers.
Permission granted. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I felt it was important to take the temperature of the room back down. I'm commanded to lay the following documents as documents of the House. Estimates of expenditure and estimates of revenue and expenditure 2026, 2027, including the 2026 to 27 pro forma financial statements. Number 2, the schedule of personal emoluments 2026 to 2027. Annual reports and audited financial statements of Hotels and Resorts Limited for the year ended March 31st, 2025. The consolidated financial statements of the Barbados Port Inc. for the year ended March 31st, 2025. Annual reports and audited financial statements of the Barbados Port Inc. for the year ended March 31st, 2024. The fiscal risk statement 2026. And finally, the Health Services Disposal of Abandoned Bodies Regulations 2026.
Public business resume.
Public business resume.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of government's business for today's sitting, and I beg to move that this sitting of the Senate be suspended until tomorrow morning, March 24th at 10 a.m.
Well, first of all, it doesn't bring us to the end of government business for the sitting, because we're going to do tomorrow. Not today, no, it's one day, it's 23. But just for clarity, just to remind honourable senators before I put a question, that the Leader of Government Business is proposing the suspension of this sitting until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. you may want to sleep with your standing orders under your pillow, because the standing orders do give specific times within which, if we do not have a quorum, they have to ring the bell, and if still no quorum, the sitting falls apart. So please be guided accordingly, and believe it was Senator Slocum who made reference to Caribbean time and the loss of productivity associated with not being on time. We do not want to lose any productivity tomorrow in that regard. And again, for the new senators, when we suspend the sitting, there's no formal entry to the president, there's no going through the agenda, bang the gavel, the sitting is resumed. It is as if we just come back from lunch or some other break. So please be guided accordingly. So thank you very much for engaging today. Look forward with great anticipation to your presentations and discussions on this appropriations bill tomorrow. Really a very interesting day. So the question is that this sitting of the Honourable Senate be suspended until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, March the 24th, 2026. Those honourable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Senate is suspended until Tuesday, March the 24th at 10 a.m.